and now to cover this breaking news, and we'll continue with you in a moment, ma'am. World stocks tumble as debt woes rumble on. And the more trillions the bankers get, the worse things get, the less they loan. This is their system. World markets fell sharply once again Thursday as sentiment continued to be hit by concerns about the continent's debt crisis, and figures showed an unexpected increase in U.S. jobless claims last week. The worries left most of the world's leading indexes now trading below where they were in 2010. At the start of 2010. In Europe, the FTSE 100 index of leading British shares closed down 84.95 points, or 1.7%, at 5,073.13, while Germany's DAX slid to 120.79 points, or 2%, to 5,867.88. The CAC 40 in France ended 79.15 points, or 2.3% lower, at 3,432.52. Things got no better on Wall Street. The Dow Jones Industrial Average plunged 209.87 points, or 2%, at 10,234.50, while the broader Standard & Poor's 500 futures dropped 25.06 points, or 2.3%, to 1,089.99. The euro debt crisis continued to be the main point of interest in the markets, and fears are growing that it may prove to be the catalyst to a renewed downturn in global growth. There has been no growth, if not an outright slide back into recession. We've never been out of the recession, folks. 3/4 of recession is depression. While stocks tank, oil prices slid below $70 a barrel. The 10-year U.S. Treasury yields dropped to a 2010 low. Sentiment is awful and confidence has been trashed, said David Buick, markets analyst at BGC Partners. I mean, the issue here is, folks, it's only going to get worse. Like we told you 2 years ago in the last stage crisis. Okay, the stimulus money's only spent on sweetheart insiders. This is a criminal consolidation. We have the internal emails of Goldman Sachs. Either they are brought to justice and kicked out of our country, along with Calderon saying this is Mexico and he wants our guns. Either we wake up and get angry, which is starting to happen, or we become debt slaves. And they'll do it. They're experts at it. They know how to bring you down into financial slavery. They know how to put a police state in to suppress you. They've done it hundreds of times. This is hardcore information, and everything is unfolding according to their program. But the awakening is bigger than they thought it would be, and Brzezinski and others are starting to panic. Knowing how this system works, Ellen Brown, and it's one thing to know it's coming. It's another thing to now see it here and to know where we're going from this point, straight down. Being a lawyer, researcher, author on the Federal Reserve, I mean, do you ever have a sense of unrealness yourself? Because I know I feel like that it's just so incredible, the earth-shaking events that are happening right now, and the public's somewhat awake, but if they had any idea just how horrific this is, I think they'd be even more awake and more angry, because I talk to so many yuppies who say, I'm glad the euro's plunging, that'll help us. No, we're going down too. We're all under the same global system. And it's people just live in denial about this. I don't think people understand. This is the beginning of the implosion, as bad as it is. We ain't seen nothing yet, as they say.
My book, Web of Debt, the theme of it is the Wizard of Oz, and that's the whole idea that nothing is what we think. Actually, the Wizard of Oz was written as a monetary allegory in the 1890s when they had a big populist movement for money reform, which is what I think we need to do today. They almost won, and now we've seen 100 years later that the bankers have messed everything up. It is time for us to step in and take back our government by taking back the money power. We have lost the power to issue our own money and our own credit, and that's where we lost our government. So, yeah. In the case of the euro, all those countries they're all in debt. Now, how is that possible if they're all in debt? It's because they're in debt to bankers, which create their money and lend it to them.
And it's designed, the bankers brag, as a black hole to consolidate the small banks, to bankrupt the states, the nations. It is designed to give them total power.
That's right. And the head is at the Bank for International Settlements, which is now tightening the screws even more they're talking about imposing,
global VAT, global carbon taxes. Yeah, break down from your research the pyramidal power structure. Who's at the top? And again, the very bankers that engineered the crisis now saying, give us global taxes, give us total control, or the economy's going to implode.
Well, the way the bankers in general have kept a tight rein on economies is by contracting the money supply. So they never allow enough money to be out there to run the whole economy, and therefore people have to borrow. And that starts this whole pyramid or Ponzi scheme where you have to have more and more borrowers to support the money supply. So you could say that the Bank for International Settlements is responsible for all this whole collapse of this whole recent collapse. In 1988, they imposed Basel I, the first capital requirement, and at that time, the Japanese banks were the biggest creditors in the world. The Japanese economy was booming, and the banks were huge, and so the Bank for International Settlements raised the capital requirement a mere 2%, from 6% to 8%. But because the Japanese banks didn't have it, they froze. So that just killed the Japanese banks, and they actually were nationalized, although they didn't use that term, but that was the only way they could keep them alive. So Japan has never recovered from that. But we avoided it, our Wall Street banks avoided it, by getting into this whole securitization thing where the banks would bundle up loans and sell them off to investors.
Well, they didn't just survive, they got more power. That was their next phase, to economically destroy the West.
Right. Well, then when they no longer were even going to have the loans on their books, they didn't care what was in these loans, because it wasn't going to be their problem. So they were doing subprime. Any borrower that walked in the door, they would sign them up because they churned the loans, got fees. And
then they sold those as AAA rated, certifying pure garbage. This has been an amazing interview. I look forward to having you back on in the future. Ellen Brown, people can find out more at ellenbrown.com, or they can go to webofdebt.com. Of course, our websites are infowars.com and prisonplanet.com. But in the last 30 seconds, how long do you think it'll be until they fully implode the U.S. publicly?
Well, I'm hoping that what we need to do is set up our own independent credit system, and then we can avoid that. If we set up a better mousetrap, then we can let all the big banks and the derivatives team, et cetera, collapse, and we will have our own funding mechanism. That's my whole...
You know what? Do a minute or two on the other side with us. I want to ask you that question about are other states looking at the Bank of North Dakota model?